Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the Assembly Committee on Judiciary to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Assemblywoman Cohen. Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Assemblywoman Hanson. Assemblywoman Hardy. Assemblywoman Kasama. Assemblywoman Krasner.
Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola. Assemblyman Miller. Assemblywoman Nguyen. Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblyman Orntlicker. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Assemblyman Wheeler. Chairman Yeager.
Here. Please mark Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod absent excused, and then when she arrives, please mark her as present. She's presenting a bill in another committee. It is that time of session. Everyone else is present. That means we do have a quorum this morning. Good morning to committee members, to those joining us in Carson City. Good morning to several guests we have on the Zoom today, and to those who may be watching over the internet or the legislature's YouTube channel. We have arrived at day 94 of the 81st session of the Nevada Legislature, which means we are definitely in the home stretch. Before we get started on today's agenda, just a few housekeeping matters. For those in the room with us, if you could please silence your devices, that would be helpful. And for those on the Zoom as well, if you could mute yourself when you're not speaking, that would be helpful. For everyone who's going to provide testimony today, if you could please state your name before you speak. That helps our committee secretaries prepare accurate minutes. And then particularly if you're asked a question and you're responding to the question, if you could please remember to state your name. We do expect courtesy and respect in our interactions with one another. We don't always agree on policy. That's perfectly acceptable, but we need to make sure we're being respectful of one another, of the legislative process, and most importantly, of our very hardworking staff. And then finally, many members up here are using multiple devices to access this morning's meeting. So please don't see it as a sign of disrespect or inattention if members appear to be looking away at times during the meeting. With those matters behind us, we're going to move on to our agenda. Members, as you can see, we have two bills on the agenda. We are going to take those bills in order. So at this time, I will open the hearing on Senate Bill 49 in its first reprint. That bill revises provisions relating to cannabis, and we have Executive Director Olimus here and a couple of members of his team as well. We have heard from him on Zoom and on the phone this session, so Mr. Olimus, it's nice to have you here in person. We'll give you a chance to go ahead and present Senate Bill 49, and then I'm sure we'll have some questions for you. So thank you, and please proceed.
Great, thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Tyler Olimus. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board. I will be introducing SB 49 to you today. This bill is very much a housekeeping and cleanup bill for the Cannabis Compliance Board and includes a number of small changes. We do have a proposed amendment to SB 49 that I will plan to go over once we finish with the bill as currently drafted. I will now briefly explain the provisions included in the bill, and we'll be happy to answer any questions once I'm finished. And I also have members of my staff here to help answer any questions as well. So with that, Section 1 of this bill, this allows the board to employ services of such persons it considers necessary to carry out disciplinary hearings. This is meant to ensure the part-time board can continue to utilize an administrative law judge for hearings. This aligns with the CCB-approved budget that provides for a full-time administrative law judge to hear CCB matters. Section 1.3 of this bill simplifies the process for serving complaints. Currently, the way the statute's written, the board has to vote blindly on approving service of a complaint. As a procedural matter, this simply allows for the executive director to serve the complaint and does not change any part of the process thereafter. Also included in this section is a provision that allows for additional flexibility to extend a 45-day requirement for the CCB to hold a hearing after a licensee answers a complaint. Section 1.7 recognizes that depositions are already allowed through approval of the hearing officer and aligns this portion of the CCB disciplinary hearing process with provisions of the Nevada Administrative Procedures Act. Section 2 of this bill simply takes authorizing language already included in NRS 678A regarding waiver requirements and mirrors it in NRS 678B for consistency and clarity. Section 3, this changes the labeling requirements of cannabis products that are offered for sale to include clearly the words, "This product contains cannabis." This is needed just to account for and align the verbiage with the new definition of cannabis products that is included now in NRS 678A. So with that, those are all the minor changes that we have here. I am happy to answer any questions from you, Chair, or the members of the committee before we move on to the amendment.
Thank you so much, Director Klimas. Committee members, do we have any questions on Senate Bill 49 in the first reprint? We'll go to Assemblyman Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pretty simple question. Why? What is, what are the problems that you're having that you need to have this bill?
Thank you, Assemblyman, and this is Tyler Klimas for the record. Essentially, the Cannabis Compliance Board's a brand-new agency, so AB 533 created it, and basically, there are some things like clarifying language that should have been in there that didn't get in there, so just kind of clean up as we're going through our first year. This is our first legislative session, so our first crack at coming back and making some of the tweaks that probably should have been made or were intended to be made.
Thank you. Follow-up? So you're not seeing really any problems right now, you're just looking toward the future is what I'm getting out of this?
That's correct, yep. Thank you. Tyler Klimas for the record.
Thank you, Director Klimas. And for members, new members of the committee, we did pass Assembly Bill 533, as Director Klimas mentioned, and that was a very large bill. I want to say it was something like 194 sections, and I recall that we got that bill very late in the legislative session. Maybe it was in May, mid-May, so I think we did the best we could with it, but certainly makes sense now that the Cannabis Compliance Board is up and running, that they would have some suggestions for language. Of course, they were not up and running when we did the statute to create them because no one had been appointed to the board quite then. So if you are interested, members, you can go back and take a look at that hearing, but you probably have other things to do rather than read a 197 section bill at this point of session. So we have some additional questions. We'll go next to Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about Section 3, Sub 1A. What happens to packaging that's already been made, or not just the packaging, but if product that's there with the old labeling?
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman Tyler Klimas, for the record. And there are those so there's a number of changes for packaging and labeling. We understand that some, licensees even purchased a large quantity of packaging before COVID and have a lot of that quantity on hand. And so we've made a commitment on record at our board meetings that we are going to work through a date. It can't be forever, right? We do have to make these changes, but we're going to ensure that there's ample time for licensees to work through their existing packaging before they do have to make those changes.
Thank you.
Do we have additional questions for Director Klimas? Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair Yeager, and thank you, Mr. Klimas, for the presentation. Can you clarify what you mean by the executive director can do service? That's kind of extraordinary. So if you could please clarify that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Assemblywoman, for the question. Tyler Klimas for the record. So the way that the bill was written, the board serves the complaint. However, the board, the complaint is investigated by CCB and the Attorney General. They recommend that a complaint be served to the board. So the board, for due process, can't see the complaint before they vote to serve it. And so at our meetings, if there's a complaint to be issued, they just vote blindly on serving the complaint. And some of our board members, including our chair, former Supreme Court Chief Justice Michael Douglas, they've put on the record that they wanted this change because it's procedural and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for them to just vote on something that they don't see anyway. And so this would allow for CCB and myself as the executive director just to make that issuance of the complaint, which essentially happens anyway. So it doesn't change any of the process thereafter. The respondent gets to respond to the complaint, and the process goes down its normal path thereafter.
Chair, follow-up?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So it is not the act of service that is changed as we know it, a process server sending, it's not that. It's determining whether or not you are going to issue. That will come from you now, as opposed to from the board as a whole.
Thank you for the question, Tyler Klimas, for the record. That's correct, but through the bill, that has to be recommended from the Attorney General. The Attorney General makes a recommendation back to the CCB to go ahead forward with that complaint.
Assemblywoman Krasner.
Thank you, Chair Yeager. Thank you for your presentation. I just had a question in Section 1, Sub 10. Allows employ the services of such persons the board considers necessary for the purposes of hearing disciplinary proceedings. Does this mean that the director or the cannabis board is going to be choosing and employing its own hearing officers to hear disciplinary proceedings against it? Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman, for the question. Tyler Klimas for the record. So like similar with other agencies, and our budget was approved to have an administrative law judge. It's a part-time board, and so they need to utilize the services of an administrative law judge to be able to hear these cases. The board is the final arbiter. So the ALJ will hear that case, but then that case comes back in front of the board as a recommendation.
Just a quick follow-up. So it just seems weird that if the cannabis board is employing the hearing officer to hear the disciplinary proceedings against the cannabis board, if the hearing officer doesn't give a ruling that the cannabis board likes, then does the cannabis board get to fire that hearing officer?
Thank you for the question. Tyler Klimas for the record. I mean, the administrative law judge, this is similar to other state agencies and how it's set up. We currently utilize the Department of Taxation's administrative law judge because we don't have one currently. And so I certainly understand what you're saying, but this seems to be consistent with other state agencies and how they employ their administrative law judges.
Thank you.
Do we have additional questions for Director Klimas on Senate Bill 49 in its first reprint? Okay, Director Klimas, I don't see additional questions on the bill as presented, so we'll give you a chance to present the amendment. Members, as Director Klimas mentioned, there is, I think it's a one-page amendment that you can find on Nellis. So I think at this time, he or a member of his team will present that amendment, and then we'll take any questions on the amendment. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Tyler Klimas again for the record. I'm going to invite Kara Cronkite. She heads up the CCB Audit and Inspection Division to come up here in a minute to present on the proposed amendment that you have before you. Before she comes up, I would just like to say that this amendment is being proposed as a result of what we feel is an urgent health and safety issue that has only recently emerged in Nevada and across the nation. That is the prevalence of synthetically manufactured substances originating from hemp plants which are readily available to individuals under 21. These substances are being extracted and manufactured by utilizing a loophole in the federal regulations that our amendment will seek to close. We worked closely with the Nevada Department of Agriculture and the Nevada Board of Pharmacy on this language, and representatives from both agencies are here to help answer any questions this committee may have. Nevada would join a number of other states who are working right now swiftly to address and close this loophole regarding the synthetic manufacturing of Delta-8 and other isomers that you'll hear about. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Cronkite to further present and explain the amendment.
Thank you, Director Klimas, and welcome to Assembly Judiciary Committee, Ms. Cronkite. We'll give you a chance to go over the amendment, and then we'll see if we have any questions for you. So when you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kara Cronkite. I'm the Health Program Manager of the Cannabis Compliance Board. Hemp and cannabis are two regulated industries that provide many jobs and tax revenue for the state of Nevada. However, some producers, mostly from out of state, have developed a process to synthetically produce intoxicating substances from hemp, which are readily available to minors. The most popular substance being Delta-8 THC. However, there are several other isomers of THC being developed that have similar intoxicating effects. These intoxicating substances are being presented as CBD products, and the consumer may not even be aware that they will become impaired. The intention of the proposed revisions is to prevent sales of intoxicating synthetic substances which are available to minors. These synthetic cannabinoids are produced by combining CBD with an acidic catalyst and then heated, resulting in typically about 70% Delta-8 THC and approximately 30% unknown reaction byproducts. Unknown compounds represent unknown health consequences to consumers. According to the DEA, this is an illicit substance, but since they do not define synthetic cannabinoid, there is a legal argument for some hemp producers to continue producing these items. Lack of federal clarity on the legality of THC isomers is where this stems from, and we're working with several other states to try to close these loopholes nationwide. This new process has created a competitive disadvantage to our licensed cannabis producers, as synthetic Delta-8 THC derived from hemp is much cheaper to produce. It is not held to the same strict testing requirements as cannabis, and it's available to minors to purchase. The ease of access to intoxicating substances to our youth is concerning. They're available in gas stations, grocery stores, and can be bought online with no age restrictions. THC consumption in youth and the effects it may have on the developing brain are also of concern. The proposed amendment defining synthetic cannabinoids would clarify what is already listed as a controlled substance under NAC 453. Many establishments within the state of Nevada believe all hemp-derived products are legal, and they're familiar with the FDA loophole of only addressing the limit on Delta-9 THC. Adding this to state law makes it very clear that synthetic cannabinoids are not allowed in Nevada. We have found that operators are not reviewing the list of controlled substances because state law allows for hemp and federal law does not specifically prohibit synthetic cannabinoids such as Delta-8 THC. The minor proposed revision to the definition of hemp in NRS 557.160 gives the Department of Agriculture more flexibility to comply with federal limits while still adhering to Nevada's definition of THC, which includes all isomers of THC and not just Delta-9. This would close the loophole that the FDA unintentionally left open when limiting the allowable concentration of THC to only Delta-9 and allows our state to clearly be in line with the DEA's opinion that synthetically derived cannabinoids such as Delta-8 are illegal. Additionally, the proposed revision to definition of marijuana in NRS 453.096 allows the Board of Pharmacy to set upper limits on the amount of THC that can be present in a single package for hemp-derived products. Hemp was intended to be the non-intoxicating form of cannabis. However, there's no upper limit for the amount of THC that may be present in a single package of hemp-derived consumable products. This is true for both naturally occurring or synthetic THC. As long as the amount of THC in the package does not exceed 0.3% of the total weight, it is currently allowed. For cannabis, the potency limit for packaged edible cannabis products is 10 milligrams per serving and 100 milligrams per package. Currently, a can of hemp-derived soda could contain as much as 1,000 milligrams of THC and still be within the legal limit based on weight alone. That's 10 times what is allowed for an adult cannabis consumer. This proposed amendment addresses the fact that these hemp-derived products could potentially contain as much as 10 times the intoxicating effect of an adult-use cannabis edible product. While this currently does not seem to be an issue in Nevada, we would like to prevent it from becoming common practice. We are already seeing a public health crisis evolve with synthetic cannabinoids. There have been 2 reports from poison centers in other states, one involving 2 adverse reactions to adults who thought they were purchasing CBD, and 2 cases of children who were admitted to the ICU after they ingested their father's gummies purchased at a vape shop. The children experienced deep sedation, slowed breathing, slowed heart rate and blood pressure, and received oxygen supplementation. We must be reminded of the e-cigarette and vaping lung injury outbreak, which peaked in 2019, resulted in nearly 3,000 hospitalizations and 68 deaths nationwide. These stemmed mostly from unregulated products from illicit or informal sources. Vitamin E acetate was one cause of this outbreak, and recall of these products was an issue due to lack of oversight and labeling of the involved products. This language, if approved, will reduce the number of operators that think they are being compliant and get these intoxicating substances off the shelves. The CCB worked in coordination with the Department of Agriculture and the Board of Pharmacy on the proposed revisions, and both are available today via Zoom to answer any additional questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cronkite. I just had a question. I know you mentioned that other states are considering or have considered similar legislation with respect to Delta-8 THC. Do you happen to know what other states have passed laws or are considering doing so? I know some states are not in session right now, but if you are able to give us a high level of perhaps some of our neighboring states, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you, Chair. Kara Cronkite for the record. I am aware that Oregon is working on some language, North Dakota as well. We worked very closely with North Dakota, and our language is very similar. And I'm sure there's several other states. I don't have a list with me, but I think Utah as well also proposed some language.
Thank you, Ms. Cronkite. Are there additional questions or questions from the committee about the proposed amendment? Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Kasama, District 2. My question is on the amendment. I'm looking at the section that says NRS 557.160, where it says hemp defined. And section 1 has the extensive meaning of what it means, and then 2 says hemp does not include any commodity or product made using hemp. Don't we have to have except as noted in section 1? Because it just says hemp doesn't include any product made using hemp, but above it has hemp includes all these things. It seems contradictory.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Tyler Klimas for the record. We could look at that with legal. I mean, I think subsection 2 would talk about, says to not include any commodity or product made using hemp.
That means like CBD products.
So it's essentially hemp after it leaves the plant and what they can make after. And we're not the experts on hemp. We do have Ashley Jepson from the Department of Agriculture. And Ashley, I'm sorry, I'll ask to put you on the spot, but if you could help clarify that, Ashley, that would be great. Chair, if that's okay.
Please go ahead.
For the record, Ashley Jepson with the Nevada Department of Agriculture. Yes, this is specific. 557 is specific to our regulations, which involves the actual registration of those growing hemp. So here within Department of Ag's statutory authority, it's ensuring that the term hemp isn't used loosely for any like CBD products. Essentially, an extracted product or an end consumer product that's in a processed form, the term hemp would not apply to those. This definition is exclusive for actual crop production. And then it expands on the definition of hemp in CCB's statutory authority, if that helps.
A little, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have additional questions from the committee on the proposed amendment? Okay, I don't see additional questions at the moment. Committee, obviously, we're getting this amendment this morning. We're hearing about it. So if you do have questions after today's meeting, Director Klimas and his team, as well as the Department of Agriculture, would be available to help answer any of those questions that you might have. But for now, it doesn't look like we have additional questions. I do want to thank you for being forward-looking and trying to take this issue on. As you're well aware, we are only in session for another 25 days, so if we don't have a chance to address this now, then it would be another 2 years, and I, for one, certainly don't want to put our youth and our consumers at risk of a substance that I believe, based on my research, has some really serious potential public health implications. So again, I want to thank you for bringing this to us. And at this time, we'll take testimony on the bill, and then we'll have you come forward for any concluding remarks when we're done taking testimony. So thank you all so much for being here this morning. At this time, I'm going to open it up for testimony in support of Senate Bill 49 in its first reprint. Let me check here in the room in Carson City. Is there anybody who would like to testify in support? I don't see anyone coming forward in Carson City. How about on the Zoom? I know we have some experts who are here for questions, but is there anyone on the Zoom that wanted to give testimony in support of Senate Bill 49? If so, if you could get my attention in some fashion by either raising your hand or unmuting yourself and letting me know you'd like to testify. I can take a look over here. I don't see that happening on the Zoom. So BPS, could we go to the phone lines to see if there's anybody there in support of Senate Bill 49, please?
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 49, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. For callers wishing to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 49, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we do not have any callers on the line in support at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I'll close testimony in support. I will now open up for testimony in opposition. Anybody here with us in Carson City in opposition to Senate Bill 49? Nobody's coming forward. Let me check the Zoom to see if there's anybody there. I don't see anyone on the Zoom indicating that they would like to testify. BPS, could we go back to the phone lines to see if there's anybody there in opposition, please?
Yes, thank you. For callers wishing to testify in opposition of Senate Bill 49, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Callers wishing to provide testimony in opposition of Senate Bill 49, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers on the line in opposition at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I'll close opposition testimony. I'll now take neutral testimony. Anybody here in the room with us in Carson City who is neutral on Senate Bill 49? I don't see anybody coming forward. Let me check the Zoom. I don't see anybody turning a camera on there. BPS, could we go back to those phone lines to see if there's anybody in the neutral position?
Thank you. For callers wishing to testify in neutral of Senate Bill 49, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. We will take the caller with the last 3 digits of 728. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Yeager and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Marla McDade Williams, M-A-R-L-A-M-C, capital D-A-D-E, W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S, with Strategies 360. I'm here to discuss Section 2, subsections 1 and 4, and the issue of 5% or less ownership as it relates to the amendatory language and a required registration or application. These provisions apply to any owner, officer, or board member, and if I understand correctly, the amendatory language is intended to have these provisions applied to publicly traded companies. We believe the language may be appropriate for an individual person who's an owner, officer, or board member, but it's insufficient for a publicly traded company. There may even be a conflict with NRS 678B.210, which requires each person who is proposed to be an owner, officer, or board member, end quote, to submit an application and comply with certain provisions of Nevada's cannabis laws. It's not clear how the requirements for ownership can be waived when these provisions remain in the statute. The consequences of this morass is that companies that are making all efforts to comply face penalties when they're caught in the middle of conflicting expectations. Further, it becomes a lot of work for the staff of the CCB as well as the members of the board. In fact, at last week's meeting of the CCB, the board spent about an hour discussing one company and the various shares transfers, and there will be further discussions at the May meeting of the board about this one company. We've had discussions with Director Klimas and Chief Investigator Staley to discuss solutions to the issue of publicly traded companies when this bill was on the Senate side, in the hopes we could propose an amendment that would better reflect how to manage investigations related to publicly traded companies. We weren't able to come to a resolution, but Director Klimas committed to working on solutions during the interim, and we appreciate that and hope it results in solutions that are fair to publicly traded companies and does not continue to penalize them or require adherence to rules that may not yield value to the CCB or the industry. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. McDade Williams. BPS, is there anybody else on the line in neutral?
Chair, there are no other callers in neutral.
Thank you, BPS. I'll close neutral testimony. I'll now invite Director Klimas back up to the table for any concluding remarks on Senate Bill 49 and its first reprint with the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Tyler Klimas for the record. No other concluding remarks other than thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you certainly, Chair and members of the committee, for considering the amendment today.
Thank you so much, Director Klimas, and thank you to the rest of your team who is here in person and on Zoom, and thanks to our representatives from the Department of Agriculture. We appreciate you spending some time with us on this Wednesday morning in Assembly Judiciary, and we hope you have a great rest of the day. I will now close the hearing on Senate Bill 49. Committee, that takes us to our second bill listed on the agenda, and that is Senate Bill 57 in its first reprint. I will open up the hearing on that measure at this time. Senate Bill 57 revises provisions governing the imposition of certain special assessments by a board of county commissioners or a governing board of a city. We have Mr. Harrison here from Clark County to present the bill, and I'll let the committee members know there is a proposed amendment from Clark County that I believe would be friendly because it is from the sponsor. I think there is also another amendment listed on Nellis, and I don't know if that amendment is friendly or not, so we'll hear in the presentation. So we'll give you a chance to make the presentation, and then I'm sure we'll have some questions. And committee, just so you know, there are quite a few folks who are registered to speak on this bill, so make yourself comfortable. We're going to be here a little while on this one. Welcome, and please go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman Yeager and members of the committee. For the record, Justin Harrison representing Clark County. I want to thank you all for taking the time to hear SB 57 today. As Chairman Yeager mentioned, also want to let you know there is a proposed amendment that you'll find on Nellis. In addition, Jim Anderson, our County Code Enforcement Administrator, is on Zoom and will be giving the second portion of the presentation, in addition to Lisa Logston from the District Attorney's Office, who will be available for questions. We've prepared a short presentation to help the committee understand the impetus for the bill, give a brief overview of the changes that are being considered to NRS 244 and 268. We mentioned the conceptual amendment that you'll find on behalf of Clark County that is friendly. There is a unfriendly amendment also posted to Nellis that we have not accepted. The amendment from Clark County was developed following conversations with stakeholders as well as a few of your colleagues on the Senate side, namely Senators Orenshaw and Neal. So a little background, the idea for SB 57 was driven directly from constituent complaints and frustration from members of our Board of County Commissioners as they received and continue to receive complaints about specific repeat violations of county code from constituents in their respective districts, and the inability of the county to take further action and gain compliance with local ordinances. As a brief overview, SB 57 would give permissive authority to counties to establish by ordinance for certain unpaid fines and fees for the violation of a county ordinance to be made a special assessment on the tax roll. These special assessments could then be collected through the property tax process. Section 1 of the bill makes these changes, and the amendment that is posted to Nellis narrows the scope of the bill for adding special assessments to the tax roll to only include violations of transient lodging laws or illegally operating short-term rentals, as well as abandoned properties. In addition, a provision has been added to extinguish the special assessment upon compliance for 180 days. Sections 2 and 3 would eliminate the time frame requirements of 180 days or 12 months as set forth in NRS 244-3603 and 244-3605, and conforming changes are made for incorporated cities governed under NRS 268. In short, only violations of county code in these specific categories with a fine over $5,000 would be eligible for a special assessment for civil penalties to be imposed. I want to be very clear from the onset, the intent of the bill is not to force people out of their homes. There has been concern about that. That is not the intent. The county's worked extremely hard, especially under the current economic conditions that our state faces, to keep people in their homes. What our board is looking for is the ability to address a matter of local concern, be responsive to constituent complaints, and bring those choosing not to observe local ordinances into compliance. The intent of the bill is just that, compliance. I'd turn your attention to the slide up on the screen or on Nellis to give you a little perspective on the number and types of complaints that our code enforcement officers received during the last calendar year or calendar year 2020. This current slide provides that annual representation of violations related specifically to property, and is broken down by the number of fines, the number of cases opened, and the percentage of cases resulting in fees by unique address, as there are properties and addresses that receive multiple fines for noncompliance as they continue to not come into compliance. In calendar year 2020, the total number of cases opened by Clark County Code Enforcement was 10,620. The number of unique properties to which fines were issued was only 1,101. So roughly 10% of folks were unwilling to come into voluntary compliance. So there is a high rate of voluntary compliance by those properties and property owners that code enforcement does go out and meet with and try to address the situation. However, some of our repeat offenders and bad actors will not come into voluntary compliance. So by narrowing the provisions of this bill to the two categories in the amendment, as well as the $5,000 threshold, there are roughly 100 properties that we have found in going through the last 3 years of code enforcement data that would fall within this scope of special assessment. So it is not a broad or far-reaching bill. It is really targeted through that amendment to specifically address repeat offenders and those that are unwilling to come into voluntary compliance. With that, committee members, I will turn the presentation over to Jim Anderson from County Code Enforcement to take you through the types of violations and get into a little more of the specifics of how that process takes place within code enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Welcome, Mr. Anderson. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to you and members of the committee. This is Jim Anderson with County Code Enforcement. Wanted to explain our code enforcement process to you a little bit as I get started here. And as Justin mentioned several times, and we talk about this all the time in our office, is voluntary compliance is always our goal with all of our cases. The second thing I think it's important to point out is that we are a reactive agency, so that all complaints that we respond to is because somebody took the time to find our phone number and call us because they're concerned about what's going on in their neighborhoods. So an example I wanted to walk you through of our enforcement process would be with a short-term rental case. When we receive a complaint of a short-term rental in a neighborhood, the first thing we do is we try to verify that the complaint exists. We do this through inspections of the property, trying to make contact with property owners. Once we do confirm that a short-term rental activity is occurring, then we send them a 30-day notice, rehabilitation notice, to get their property into compliance. Now, at this point, the owner has an opportunity to appeal the notice. They can request an administrative hearing through our office. Once the hearing is complete, if they're not satisfied by the outcome of the hearing, they can also request a judicial review through the courts of that notice as well. At the end of that time frame, we will continue to check the property to see if they've come into compliance or not. If we can confirm that the violation is continuing after the notice is expired, then we will issue a civil penalty to the property owner. We will issue a fine to them. Again, once a fine is issued, they still have the same due process and remedies to them to appeal the citation. So they can request an administrative hearing, and depending upon the hearing results, if they're not satisfied with that, again, they can request a judicial review. And so once that goes through the process, if it is upheld, then ultimately a lien is placed on the property. And we continue with that process of conducting inspections and issuing civil penalties if the violation continues at that point in time. So the challenges we have with some of the short-term rentals is it takes multiple inspections oftentimes to prove a violation exists. The officers go out to the doors, they knock on the doors, they see if they can make contact with somebody. We receive additional complaints from neighbors. And so we're continually checking these properties. Some of the cases that have been going on for a long time have upwards of over 100 inspections that we've conducted on them. Anytime in this process, if an owner calls us and says that they would like to come into compliance, they like additional time, they want to discuss it with us, we stop our enforcement actions, we work with them, and we try to help them get the properties into compliance. So why are we asking for this bill? Why do we need this? So a vast majority of our cases, as Justin mentioned, we're able to get them into compliance through education, through discussing the ordinances with them, and no abatement actions are necessary. There's no civil penalties that are issued. But we do have cases, short-term rentals being one of them, where abatement is not an option. And the challenge that we have is that liens on the properties don't always work. Many of these property owners are investors. They're intention is not to sell these properties in the near future. So if they're not going to sell the property, then those liens don't need to be paid until such time as they do sell the property. And so some of the properties have multiple cases that have gone on for years. They have pretty hefty fines levied against them, and yet they still continue to operate. I wanted to give you a couple examples of other types of cases that we're dealing with that this bill would discuss. So, and that's chronic nuisances, dangerous conditions on abandoned buildings. I believe we have a slide for that as well. So these are the cases that we're continually responding to the same location. Oftentimes we have squatters that have moved into abandoned buildings and they're living in those homes. We are continually responding and we are boarding and securing those properties. Perhaps those properties need to be demolished and we're working with the owners to try to get them to do that, or they just need significant rehabilitation. A lot of these property owners buy these properties or own these properties as investment properties, and they're really not interested in investing much money to get these back into livable conditions. They're content with hanging on to the properties in this condition until such time as they can turn around and resell it. And so in these cases, again, we can issue civil penalties for these violations. And the challenges we have with collecting those is that for a chronic nuisance type of case, we have to wait 180 days before that can be placed on the tax roll. And if it is abandoned property, we have to wait 12 months to place that on the tax roll. And so what we've seen in some of these cases as we send our collection notices to the property owners is that oftentimes they will quit claim deed the property to another family member. They put it in a different name, and they avoid paying these fines, all the while not doing anything to correct the conditions on the property, which creates a nuisance in the neighborhood, a burden on law enforcement as they're responding to squatter complaints and code enforcement resources as well as we continue to board these properties. The other type of cases I wanted to talk about a little bit more in detail are short-term rentals, and we have a different slide for that as well, please. So short-term rentals currently are not allowed in unincorporated Clark County, but we have many of these operators that continue to host short-term rentals on their properties, even though they've been asked to shut down. So again, the challenge is it's very difficult to prove. As I stated earlier, we respond to these properties multiple times to get them into compliance. These property owners often coach their renters on either they tell them don't talk to code enforcement if they come to the door. If they do come to the door, tell them that you're a family member. We've seen in multiple properties that right inside the door, they have a sign hanging there of what to tell code enforcement or law enforcement if they come to the door about how they are in the property or why they are staying in the property. And so they go to great lengths to avoid us being able to prove the violation. We've had folks even hand us fake leases for the property, saying that they're staying there for longer than 31 days. And the big challenge with short-term rentals is really a lot of these properties can be a huge disruption in the neighborhood. So we have folks that come from out of town, they want to come to Las Vegas, they want to have a good time. But the problem is they bring the party mentality that they might have staying in a strip resort where it's appropriate, and they bring that into the neighborhoods. And oftentimes when you talk to these renters, they're like, well, I'm just here for a weekend. And that's fine. But the problem is it's going on every weekend and during the week. And so folks who live here directly around those properties can have a hugely impacted negatively by these properties continue to operate. And so this really targets the worst of the worst offenders, those properties where we're continually getting complaints for the neighbors, where law enforcement is continually responded, and yet our fines are just not working. Currently, there's other legislation that's being proposed, which would require Clark County to permit and regulate the short-term rentals. So I just want to point out the data across the country has shown that in the best regulated, permitted jurisdictions where they have very successful efforts at permitting these properties, they still are only getting 60% compliance with short-term rentals to register their properties properly. And some of the highest rates I've heard are 75%, which means in unincorporated Clark County alone, that would still leave us upwards of a couple thousand, 2,000 unpermitted short-term rentals. And so as I mentioned earlier, voluntary compliance is the goal. Education to property owners is what we're trying to do. we always liken it to what is the minimum amount of pressure we can put on this property owner to get them to comply with our codes. And sometimes it's just a notice that works. Sometimes it's a small fine. Sometimes it's larger fines. Sometimes it's an abatement action when that's appropriate. But when we've exhausted all of those remedies, all of our normal processes, and the owner still refused to comply, we need another option that will help us to compel compliance. And I really believe that the ability to place these fees and fines on as a special assessment will help us to gain compliance with those property owners. That concludes my portion, Mr. Chair. I'd like to hand it back over to Justin to wrap it up.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, members of the committee. For the record, Justin Harrison. Just to wrap up on a few of the points that Mr. Anderson made. Code enforcement and the complaints that come in are done on they're not done on a proactive basis. These are complaints that are coming in from community members who see a real effect in their neighborhoods. They see changes, and they are hoping to see the same thing we are. They're hoping to see compliance. I will note that this idea for the bill was also initially brought forward in speaking with incorporated cities who are currently using this authority and this power. As you're aware, cities are governed slightly differently than counties here in the state, and we're looking to come on to an equitable playing field. Really, we see this as an enforcement provision, as Mr. Anderson mentioned, whether or not short-term rentals are permitted or not permitted in Clark County. And we see that process going forward through Assembly Bill 363. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I know we have a few questions. I just had one. I was looking at the slideshow that you had up there about the party houses, and I noticed flamethrowers, rocket launchers, and monkeys. And so my question was that at one party, or were those three separate incidents? And were you able to do anything? I don't know about the monkeys, but flamethrowers and rocket launchers, I think, would probably violate criminal law. So just wondered if you had any ability to do enforcement on that.
Mr. Chair, Jim Anderson, for the record. I believe it was two separate properties with those instances. Actually, law enforcement responded multiple times to one of those properties, and they actually started a chronic nuisance process because in addition to that, there was a number of other criminal violations taking place on that property. And so it's been quiet for a while, thankfully. So I think they have had some success on the criminal side to cease that activity.
Thank you. And I thought my Saturday nights with dinner and a movie were exciting. I guess I'm not being invited to the right parties. I don't mean to make light of that, but I don't know that I would have predicted those three things in one sentence together. So thank you for that. We do have a number of questions, and committee members, I know many of you have questions, so I'll just ask for your patience as we get through questions. So far, I have Assemblywoman Gonzalez, Vice Chair Wynn, Assemblywoman Krasner, and Assemblywoman Kasama. And I'm sure we're going to have more after that. So we'll start with Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Thank you so much, Chair. Assemblywoman Gonzalez, District 16 for the record. I have a couple of questions, and you kind of touched on it briefly when you were talking about like other cities. So I was just curious, is this what's happening in other cities? Is this the process? Is this like a common practice throughout the country?
For the record, Justin Harrison, Clark County. Mr. Chairman, through you to Assemblywoman Gonzalez. We had consulted with the City of Las Vegas. They are currently using this process. Specifically, they had mentioned to assess special assessments for illegally operating short-term rentals. I'm not aware of any specific jurisdictions across the country that are doing this, but it is something that is happening locally in Clark County, and would ask Mr. Anderson if he is aware of any other jurisdictions.
Jim Anderson for the record. Yes, I have spoken with other agencies that have used this remedy, and it is being successful in helping them to shut down.
Thank you so much. Do you know where these places are doing this policy? Are we talking like in our state or like in other cities in various states?
Jim Anderson for the record. I've spoken to folks in other states. We've spoken to multiple agencies, so I don't have that list specific to that answer in front of me, but I can certainly get that information. I know in California that was occurring in some of the jurisdictions we spoke to.
Thank you so much. Assemblywoman Gonzalez, District 16 for the record again. And then my second question is, I don't know if you touched on this in the presentation, I just missed it. So is there like steps in place before we get here, or would you have the ability to go straight to this option with this bill?
Jim Anderson for the record. There's a noticing process that I mentioned that we go through initially to give the property owners time to comply and shut down, and their due process to have a hearing as well as a judicial review of the results of that hearing if they're not satisfied. And then civil penalties are levied at that point, where again they have the same judicial review opportunities through an administrative hearing and a court review of that process. From that point, a lien is placed on the properties, and that lien stands, and we would only convert these fines onto the tax roll once a year as we forward those on. So throughout the process, there's opportunities for them to pay, to cease the activity, and not have these levied on this tax roll.
Thank you so much. But could you go straight to this process if that was what you wanted to do?
Jim Anderson for the record. No, we could not.
Okay.
We would have to follow the process that I just explained.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Vice Chair Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'm sure you're sick of talking with me about short-term rentals and stuff, but I appreciate you bringing Senate Bill 57 and trying to come up with a solution. I know that I spent a great deal of time talking with Yvette Williams and some of the other neighbors in the Spring Valley Township, as well as meeting with local Metropolitan Police Department that are, having issues with some of these larger. They really are mini hotels right in the middle of like neighborhoods within Clark County. And I see your amendment. I'm assuming this was an attempt to kind of narrow the scope of what our Senate Bill 57 would include. Are there provisions in here that is it discretionary for the counties to determine whether or not they are going to seek on these? You said these were going after the worst of the worst, like the major offenders that were, you were trying to hold them accountable. What about the people that are not running huge hotels, but maybe have like a smaller home that they were renting out to families, either unintentionally or even intentionally illegally?
Thank you for the question. For the record, Justin Harrison, Clark County. Mr. Chairman, through you to Assemblywoman Nguyen. First, never too many conversations with you. Thank you for being so open to discussing AB 363 as well as SB 57. To answer your question, really, with the amendment, that was the intention, to narrow the scope. That was a suggestion from your colleagues in the Senate as well as stakeholders, but we think in addition to narrowing the scope of the bill to those two categories, as well as the $5,000 threshold, that really gets at the heart of the repeat offender, those that are unwilling to come into compliance. At $5,000, really code enforcement has to be out and issue multiple fines for multiple violations to get to that threshold. It's not something that's going to come quickly. But it really has to be at that point, we feel intentional in order to get to that barrier, that threshold of $5,000. And there is quite a bit of time before that would happen. As Mr. Anderson mentioned, these special assessments would only be put on the tax roll once a year. So depending on when that falls, it could be 9 months, 10 months, 11 months before the special assessments are even put on the tax roll. And really, again, to go back to what we've mentioned before, the goal is compliance. We think this, in tandem with AB 363 and allowing a legal route to licensure of short-term rentals in Clark County, forces folks into that legal lane. But I will mention again, as Mr. Anderson did, even in large jurisdictions with large compliance bodies and enforcement, at times it's only 60-70% of short-term rentals that do come into compliance voluntarily. So you still have an illegal market out there. So I apologize for the lengthy answer, but the idea is yes, with that $5,000 threshold and the narrowing of the bill, we see this as getting at those that are repeat offenders that are unwilling to come into compliance.
And a follow-up, Chair, if I may. With respect to the $5,000, would that be per violation, or is that like a cumulative amount?
For the record, Justin Harrison, thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. That would be a cumulative amount. The counties don't have the authority to issue fines over $1,000, so we would be unable to issue a $5,000 fine or penalty at one time.
And then we heard in testimony in Assembly Bill 363 that there was potentially up to 7,800 unlicensed short-term rentals like in Clark County. Obviously, there are provisions where they're not allowed, so they're all operating illegally at this point. As far as violations of building codes and health regulations, I know in meeting with Ms. Williams and her neighborhood in that community, they had pictures of illegal septic tanks being installed in some of these homes and 20-foot walls and sound things. Would these violations be just for building? I guess, would they building code, health regulations? What kind of authority are you able to capture with what you have existing in your ordinances?
Thank you for the question. For the record, Justin Harrison with Clark County. Initially, Assemblywoman, the bill did include illegal construction within its scope. With it narrowed, it would not include those provisions. That is something, and I can let Mr. Anderson speak to that point, that we are seeing as many of these operators are either expanding by converting structures or garages, adding additional bedrooms, patios, putting in additional bathrooms that require septic systems. So that is something we're seeing. It's something we've removed from the bill, as there were some concerns about individuals using perhaps handymen for small construction projects around their house, not knowing the permit process, and this potentially getting at that problem. That is something we've taken out of the bill, but I'll let Mr. Anderson speak more to that point.
Jim Anderson for the record, Mr. Chair, through you to Assemblywoman Nguyen. And I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm trying to go in a little more detail than what Mr. Harrison said. When we have violations that include short-term rentals and other types of unpermitted activity, whether it's unpermitted construction and that sort of thing, those are separately handled by our office. We have separate cases on them, so they wouldn't be joined together to either meet that $5,000 threshold or even to be handled through our noticing and due process enforcement process together. So they're handled completely separately, but we do have the tools in place to be able to address all those concerns you just mentioned.
And then finally, one last question. I know that obviously if there are in fact 7,800 of these unlicensed in Clark County alone, what kind of enforcement team do you have within Clark County to be able to even start addressing these issues?
Jim Anderson for the record, Mr. Chair, through you to Assemblywoman Nguyen. Currently, we have a 6-person team that's dedicated to addressing our short-term rental violations. It consists of 4 code enforcement specialists, 1 supervisor, and 1 support staff who does a lot of the research for those cases. And again, even though we have that large of amount in unincorporated Clark County, we are only reactive. So we're only responding to the cases where people call and complain about. So we are averaging about 900 complaints per year that we're able to address with the current manpower that we have.
And when you say 900 that you're able to address, are you receiving more than 900 a year? You're just only able to process that many?
Jim Anderson for the record. No, I apologize. We only receive 900 complaints and we address all of them.
And feel free to go directly to the member when answering questions if you would like. We're going to go next to Assemblywoman Krasner.
Thank you, Chair Yeager. Thank you for your presentation. I just had a couple of questions. So with this bill, are we shifting the cost of a small number of individuals violating county ordinances to the rest of the housing market? And then do you think that this will result in mortgages being more expensive in Nevada? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Krasner. For the record, Justin Harrison with Clark County. We think this really touches on a small number of individuals that are repeat offenders, as I'd mentioned. Going through our own data at Clark County, given the amendment that would narrow the bill to those operating illegal short-term rentals, as well as abandoned properties, as well as incorporating the $5,000 threshold, this really would only affect 97 properties over 3 years. So the universe, we believe, is very small. We've worked to try to narrow this intentionally to avoid that exact problem. We have heard concerns from the banking and mortgage industry attributing to the fact that this could really be a problem as far as risk and risk assessment goes. We've asked for some data back to show that with such a narrow universe, would this really affect the entire mortgage industry in Clark County or the state of Nevada, and have not heard back. So to partially answer your question, we feel this is a very small universe. I can't answer that directly as I don't have that information, but we'll continue to work with those stakeholders and hopefully be able to answer that for you.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Kasama, District 2, for the record. Thank you very much, Mr. Harris, for the presentation. It clearly is a problem. We have another bill, short-term rentals. We've got this one here. And I think not only for Clark County, but I know for HOA communities, similar problems where they had repeat offenders, couldn't do anything. And so we had legislation passed, I don't know what year, I wasn't here in the assembly, to give them a super priority lien for 9 months of HOA fees, but many cases they had 5 years worth of HOA fees that ate up the value of the property and finally gave them an ability. But in that case as well, when they could, foreclose on the property for repeat offenses, not responding to properly served notices, I know there was concerns with the banks at that time for the first priority lien. So in your bill, I just wanted to clarify here that you're going to add it to the property tax rolls, and that will give you the ability to foreclose on the property. And then not only the property taxes, but this assessment for these fines, that would be in a first position versus the first lien from the bank. Is that correct?
For the record, Justin Harrison, Clark County Assemblywoman, thank you for the question. Yes, so in discussions with the mortgage industry, we do see that having the special assessment tied to the property taxes would put it in first position. For that reason, we've added the proposed language in the amendment to extinguish the special assessment upon compliance. We're not looking to take the home and bring it to tax sale. We're not even looking to collect on the special assessment. We're looking for the property owner to come into compliance. Thus the impetus for putting that language into the bill. We want to see, on behalf of the property owner, a willingness to stay in compliance, thus the language for 180 days. But we see that as really nullifying those concerns, as so long as the property is in compliance, there would be no special assessment. So I don't know if that answers your question, or if I can follow up.
And I do believe you need the authority for the bad actors that just don't do anything and your hands are tied. You can only put liens on, and if they don't sell the property, it has no meaning to them. And so if they're making plenty of money off of it, they don't care. So I really believe you need some type of mechanism. My concern is by having a super priority over the first lien, there is risk with the Bankers Association with the loans that they place in the state of Nevada. And the higher the risk, they'll end up with premium pricing on the loans. So then what happens is in the state of Nevada, the home buyer has a higher mortgage than they do in another state. And so it's premium pricing. It's just how things work. And I'm just concerned for our first-time home buyers, affordable housing, that potentially loan rates could be higher because of this. And so I don't know if there's consideration that you need the ability to foreclose, but that the assessments would be below the first lien, because the goal is to stop the bad actor, not to collect money. I know money and penalties is a vehicle to get things done, and we need to have that. But if there's consideration for that, so that we don't end up with premium pricing on loans. So just a consideration for that.
Sure, and just a quick follow-up for the record, Justin Harrison with Clark County. Thank you, Assemblywoman. That consideration was given, and we think, again, by narrowing the universe, that really looking at the risk assessment that those mortgage lenders do take into consideration is incredibly small. We've gone through the conversation of HOA as their super priority position being a vastly larger universe than the 97 cases we see over 3 years. Additionally, and this has been brought up before, the ability for municipalities to go through this current process, and we've not heard back to see how that is being handled by the mortgage and banking industry. And there seems to be no concern or in that case, knowledge that this is happening. So I don't see it affecting that in that way. From my layman's standpoint, I'm not a mortgage or banking industry expert, but would say that was the impetus for including that provision in the bill of extinguishment upon compliance, because that is the goal. With that, I feel like this is a good time to address the proposed amendment from the mortgage and banking industry of only having the ability to place the special assessment on properties without mortgages. We went through and did our due diligence and really looked at each individual property that would fall within this threshold over the last 3 years, and 75% of those properties did have a mortgage. So really, this would only get at a quarter of those cases. We also see that as a potential liability of treating properties differently. And third, really, there's nothing stopping a property owner who doesn't have a mortgage from going out and getting one if they're in this situation, if they are savvy enough to have set up an operation to where they're making large amounts of money and have either paid off the mortgage or bought the property in cash. There's nothing from keeping them from going out on the open market, getting a small mortgage, and then protecting themselves from that provision. So I apologize for the tangent, but felt it was a good segue to address that proposal.
And for the record, I do support whether the home has a mortgage or not. I think you need the ability to remove the bad actors, and whether they have a mortgage or not doesn't mean they're a bad actor or not. They just are. So I don't think that should be a criteria. So thank you.
Assemblyman O'Neill? Fantastic. We have a number of other questions, so I appreciate the passing of the torch. So we'll go next to Assemblyman Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I see what you guys are trying to do here, but I'm just wondering, as I look at the bill, right on the front page here, it says on behalf of Clark County, it's being presented by Clark County. And I look through the bill, I don't see anything in here about any of the other counties. And I don't see a population cap on it. So I'm wondering, am I just missing something? Or is this going to be imposed upon the entire state? Or is this just for Clark County? Because I don't see it in here.
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Wheeler. For the record, Justin Harrison with Clark County. That is correct. This would apply to all counties in the state. There is no population cap as currently written.
Okay, thank you very much.
Assemblywoman Cohen?
Thank you, Chair. So you've talked about the party homes and the short-term rentals and the nuisance homes where there's disrepair, but can you address, because I understand that compliance is the goal, but what do you do to get to compliance when you have a hoarder who has a mental health condition or someone who just, the home is in disrepair, but they're just not capable of keeping it up? How, is there any help from the county on that?
For the record, Justin Harrison, I will turn that over to Mr. Anderson on Zoom.
Jim Anderson, for the record, Assemblywoman Cohen. Code enforcement works really hard with those property owners who are willing to comply with our ordinances and for whatever reason have difficulties. And oftentimes it's somebody who, a hoarder who may have some mental health challenges. Sometimes it's elderly folks who don't have the resources in place to be able to remedy some violations on their property. And so we work very hard to try to find them other resources to help remedy those violations. So in the case of a hoarding situation, we put together a task force in the past that included many different agencies, including mental health folks, to come together to meet with the property owners to try to see if we can resolve the issues out there without enforcement action. And we've sometimes still have to do some abatement type of actions in those cases, but at the same time, we're getting them the help that they need. Other times, if it's an elderly person, there's faith-based organizations that are willing to help. We can reach out to different folks to see what we can do. And sometimes the answer is if maybe it's an inexpensive project. One of our contractors will donate the work, or occasionally we just have to give them a sufficient amount of time to make sure it gets done. So again, when folks are willing to work with us, we will do what it takes to try to help them to come into compliance on their own.
Assemblyman Orentlicker?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill. David Orentlicker, Assembly District 20. I just want to clarify a small difference in language between what's on your slide and what's in the conceptual amendment in describing the narrower class of offenses. So on the slide, it says squatters and abandoned houses, and the conceptual amendment says abandoned houses, which seems more consistent with your discussion, and so I hope that's what you intend.
For the record, Justin Harrison, Clark County. Assemblyman, yes, and I apologize for that typo on the slide. That is the proposal is to, the proposed language is for abandoned houses.
Thanks.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong?
Thank you, Chair. My question was asked and answered.
Great, thank you. Assemblywoman Gonzalez, did you have another question? No? Okay. Does anyone else have questions for Clark County? You know I'm going to ask at least one, and Mr. Harrison, I don't know if you can answer this. I know there are a number of other folks who may be in a better position to answer it, but here is the question. So under the current structure of the NRS for non-judicial foreclosures, particularly I'm speaking of the HOA fees, there are all these rights of redemption where folks have a time period to be able to pay, and I believe the primary note holder, normally a mortgage company, also has the right to come in and pay the fees and fines so that the property is not foreclosed upon. If we were to pass this bill, is it your understanding that all of those kind of protections that are already in place with respect to super priority liens and HOA fees would apply in this circumstance as well? Or would this sort of create a different process, a different track with potentially without those protections? And I know it's a pretty technical legal question, so no problem if we need to punt to somebody else.
I appreciate the question. For the record, Justin Harrison with Clark County. Thank you, Assemblyman. I will actually turn that over to Lisa Logsdon from the District Attorney's Office and see if she can answer that.
Good morning, Chairman. Lisa Logsdon for the record. So with it becoming a special assessment that comes on the tax roll, it will then be afforded all of the due process protections that apply with the tax sale process. So that process is even more procedures and more protections for the homeowner than even in a non-judicial foreclosure sale. So there's multiple rights of redemption, and yes, the mortgage holder is entitled to those notices, and they're entitled to redeem any of those properties. And if you're familiar with the tax sale process, it is a lengthy process. It's a 3-year process before the county can even deem the property eligible for a tax sale. And like I said, during that process, there are multiple notices and multiple opportunities to redeem the property. And also by the county putting in that provision regarding compliance, we could always take that special assessment off the tax roll if the property comes into compliance. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. And I have one follow-up on that. And again, this may be beyond your scope of expertise, but in the property tax sale, if the mortgage holder decides that they want to come in and satisfy the fees that were assessed so that the property is not non-judicially foreclosed, is the note holder somehow able to roll that amount into the existing mortgage or have it as an assessment so that in theory, they would recoup the money at some point? And again, I know that's not what you guys, it's not the process you're in, but I just wondered if you could shed some light on that, or if not, hopefully some of our other folks testifying would be able to.
Lisa Logsdon for the record. Yeah, I am not familiar with what the mortgage company's rights are under their mortgage or their deed of trust documents. I believe with property taxes, there are provisions in there in which allow them to recoup those, just as though they would pay the property taxes through escrow. So, and I believe they may do those with special improvement districts such as SIDs. So it would really be contingent on what's in their deed of trust documents.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. I'll have one last call for questions here from committee members. I think almost everyone's asked a question, so I don't see additional questions at this point. So thank you for presenting the bill. We're going to take some testimony, and then we'll have a chance to come back for concluding remarks on the bill. So at this point, I'm going to take testimony in support of Senate Bill 57 in its first reprint, and we'll give Mr. Harrison a chance here to vacate our one chair at the table, and we'll start with testimony here in Carson City. So please go ahead, sir.
Good morning, Chair Yeager and committee members. For the record, my name is Steve Walker. I'm representing Carson City and Story County. We are in support of the bill. We do feel this bill, and particularly because it's enabling, can give us another tool to solve some of these problems. Obviously, the amendments have limited its applicability, but we still feel that we are in support, and we, again, feel that because it's enabling through ordinance, we can use it as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Good to see you here in person, finally. It's been a long time. So we'll continue to take testimony and support here in Carson City. Is there anybody else who'd like to offer testimony and support? I don't see anybody else here in the room in Carson City. Let's go to the Zoom. Do we have anyone on the Zoom other than our presenters who would like to testify in support? If so, if you could turn your camera on, unmute yourself, and let me know that you'd like to speak, please. Okay, I don't hear anyone on the Zoom indicating they'd like to speak. BPS, could we go to the phones to take testimony and support there, please?
Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 57, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. We will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 286. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. My name is Jamie Rodriguez. That is spelled Jamie-Rodriguez. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for Washoe County. I'm here today in support of AB 57, or SB 57, excuse me. We want to thank Clark County for bringing the bill forward. As many of you are aware, Washoe County recently passed our ordinances regarding the enforcement of STRs in unincorporated Washoe County, most of which are the Lake Tahoe area. So we are very supportive of this bill to give some parity between counties and cities, as well as helping give us some additional tools in the toolbox if we do have operators who are bad actors, and we may need to, have more options to ensure that those bad actors either address the issues or stop operating for safety of the community.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Rodriguez. BPS, are there additional callers in support?
Next caller with the last 3 digits of 888. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Vincent Guthrow. That's spelled Zinson. Last name Guthrow, Guthreau. I serve as the Deputy Director of NACO, the Nevada Association of Counties, and we are testifying today in support of SB 57. We believe the enabling language in SB 57, allowing counties to pass an ordinance to make fines related to real property special assessments on property tax bills, is an important option for local government. This legislation provides an additional mechanism to allow local governments to address chronic nuisance issues that often affect health and safety of residents in their communities. With the conceptual amendment presented by Clark County, NACO believes this brings balance to enforcement and provides an incentive to ensure a speedier resolution and compliance to outstanding violations. Again, NACO supports SB 57, and we appreciate Clark County bringing this bill forward, and we thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Guthrow. BPS, let's take the next caller in support, please.
Next caller with the last 3 digits of 456. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Yeager and members of the committee. My name is AJ Delap of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. My last name is phonetically spelled David Easy Lincoln Adam Paul for the record. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is in support of SB 57 and believe that this measure will assist in curbing some of the most egregious public safety issues involving short-term rentals. With that, Chairman Yeager and members of the committee, I would like to conclude my short testimony and wish you all a good day.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Delap. BPS, let's take the next caller, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 938. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Yeager, Vice Chair Wynn, and members of the committee. Ariel Edwards, ARIELLE, EDWARDS with the City of North Las Vegas. The City of North Las Vegas offers support for Senate Bill 57. We want to thank the bill sponsor, Clark County, for the work on this bill and urge your support for this measure. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Edwards. BPS, let's please take the next caller.
Chair, there are no other callers in support at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I'll close testimony in support. We'll now open it up for testimony in opposition, and we will start here in the room in Carson City. Would anybody like to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 57? Please come forward.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is Louis Korndyke, Louis Koorndyk, and I'm the co-founder of the Greater Las Vegas Short-Term Rental Association. 2 minutes is not much time. I will make myself available if anybody has any questions. We strongly oppose SB 57, and the reason being, well over 2 years ago, I had to put my parents in assisted living. I had 2 investment properties. I converted those properties to rent as an STR so I could afford the assisted living for my parents. Everything worked out great. It was covering all the expenses. Clark County Code Enforcement then started giving me liens against or fines against the property. I was shocked, and I actually thought it was a joke. The health of my parents took precedence. I continued to rent the properties out on a short-term basis because I was having no problems at all. Before I knew it, I had $72,000 in fines. It got to $72,000 because code enforcement subpoenaed Airbnb's records and backfined me and hit me with all those fines within just a couple of notices. I stopped renting the property out on a short-term basis. I've been in compliance for well over 2 years now. But now, Clark County wants to introduce SB 57 to finish me off once and for all. I spent every penny I had taking care of my parents since I was no longer able to rent my properties out on a short-term basis. Now, I don't have that $72,000, and they're going to want to now take my properties. This is an absolute egregious action. There is nobody that should have, no municipality should have that kind of power over its citizens to take their properties away. I really appreciate all of your time and listening to my story. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony here this morning, and I would invite members, if you do have questions for Mr. Korndyke, to ask him offline because we have a lot of folks who want to testify, but appreciate you being here this morning. We will stick with testimony here in Carson City in opposition. Is there anybody else in the room who'd like to testify in opposition? Right, I don't see anybody coming forward. Let's go to the Zoom. Do we have anyone on the Zoom who is in opposition? I can't see everyone who's on the Zoom, so if you are on there, if you could unmute and turn your camera on and let me know you'd like to speak in opposition, please. I don't see or hear anybody, which makes me believe we have a number of folks on the phone. BPS, could we go to the phone lines and take our first caller in opposition, please?
Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in opposition of Senate Bill 57, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. We will start with caller with the last 3 digits of 336. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Phyllis Gergovich, PHYLLIS for the record, here representing Nevada Bankers Association. Thank you, Chair Yeager, and thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to testify. Nevada Bankers Association opposes SB 57. In residential lending, lenders need to rely on the property as collateral. It's what secures their loans. Called secured lending. It's why the interest rates for a home loan are so much lower than that of an unsecured loan like a credit card. And anything that puts that security or collateral at risk creates an environment where costs for those loans escalate while the number of participating lenders in the market goes down, which offers less consumer choice and further increases prices for potential home buyers. So there's a saying in the industry that they use, it's first in time, first in line. It's really the golden rule so that everybody knows clearly where they stand, and it allows informed decisions based on that standing. In the case of priority liens, they jump existing liens. And regardless of how narrowly one tries to focus or limit what the intention is, it's the ability to place a priority lien that creates the risk, and that risk then applies to every single property in Nevada. Obviously, can cause major disruptions in the market, and that amount of disruption gets the attention of the GSEs. Those are your Fannie Mae, Freddie-backed, VA, FHA-backed loans, which currently represents upwards of 85% of the home loans in Nevada. So we recognize the serious issue, and we feel the county's frustration with the violators that won't fall in line. But we truly believe that forcing lenders, home buyers, the real estate market, all to pay the penalty for someone else's, other people's ordinance violations that they're really not party to and have no control over. This just isn't an equitable solution. So NBA members are strongly opposed to this bill. We remain extremely concerned whenever priority liens rise up in the home lending industry. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. BPS, could we take the next caller, please?
Next caller with the last three digits of 643. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Swizz Rizard with American for Prosperity, and that's spelled WIZROUZARD. On behalf of American for Prosperity Nevada, and that's the Director of Grassroots Operation, I ask the Judiciary Committee to oppose Senate Bill 57. First of all, I will say we've been working very diligent with you all, and this committee has done some tremendous work in the last 6 years just on the judicial process of our state and really applying the law, but more importantly, making sure things are fair and making sure that individuals, especially those who are financially least unfortunate, have ways to remedy situations when they do arise, and rather than letting them ruin their lives, it gives them a chance to be on the straight path. Senate Bill 57 actually would do away with all of that work. We've asked Clark County on several occasions, we've even introduced an amendment to provide protection for those, and I forget the assembly person who brought it up, but there are individuals who are just financially unable to meet the fines and fees, the excessive fines and fees that Clark County has deliberately applied to these individuals, not because their property is dangerous, not because of trash, not because of their issues, simply because of renting out their home or a room for less than 30 days. And our proposed amendment was we wanted to make sure Clark County had established a procedure for the county to determine an individual's ability to pay the unpaid fines and fees. They denied that. We asked the county to make sure if there was going to be a payment amount where they're talking about they have 9 to 12 months to pay off this loan, and if they don't, then it can go into foreclosure. We said, people are literally on fixed income, and some people through the pandemic don't have a job. We've asked them to place a 5% cap on people's monthly net income for that unpaid fee. They denied that. We asked to make sure that those individuals who are unemployed or don't have any financial means to provide for the fines and fees, could they do community service? They denied that. So Clark County is not interested in allowing people to remedy their infractions. More importantly, as Louis Korndike said, they not only cumulatively add the fines, they retroactively, meaning they go hunt down the activities on that property and impose these fines. So for this reason, amongst many, we ask that you all oppose this bill. There's a proper place and procedure for remedying those small percent of bad actors, but this is definitely not it. And I wouldn't want to see the Judiciary Committee work, which you all have done tremendous work and did a great job on, really go for vain, because this bill really is going to target those who are financially fortunate. And there's multiple stories that, much like Louis Korndike, where they're not aware of short-term renting being illegal, and during the pandemic, they rented their room or their whole house for less than 30 days because they didn't want to deal with a long-term renter, only to be hit with $5,000, $6,000 fines in one occasion. And yes, that was a bartender that called me and cried because she's now facing $7,000 fines from Clark County because she rented her home after a long-term renter sabotaged her property and she was unemployed. So we ask that you all oppose this bill, and we greatly thank the work that you all are doing. Hats off to Rochelle Nguyen looking for ways to actually legalize this and making sure property owners in Nevada who face financial hardship have another economic vehicle to supplement their income and stay in their home. So we thank you, and please oppose Senate Bill 57.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Rizard. BPS, let's take the next caller in opposition, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 100. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 100, please press *6 to unmute yourself so you may begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Yeager and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Sylvia Sylvia Smith, Smith, Turk, Turk. I am here on behalf of the Nevada Land Title Association, and we're speaking in opposition of SB 57. Like others who have and will be testifying in opposition, the NLTA shares the concerns about our ability to ensure title on these properties in the event SB 57 passes. The Federal Housing Finance Agency, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, other major lenders, and credit unions may pull back on lending options in Nevada. This will affect future property buyers and homeowners wishing to refinance. We recognize these properties are a problem. We recognize that Clark County is attempting to address this issue through SB 57. However, NLTA shares the concerns of others that this is not the pathway to address the problem. It will have an adverse impact on the real estate marketplace in Nevada. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Smith Turk. BPS, next caller in opposition, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 983. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. This is Teresa McKee, MCKEE. I'm with Nevada Realtors. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. While the Realtors support full compliance of and enforcement of laws, including the short-term rental laws, we look to the larger issue to the state as a whole and believe that this would create instability in lending, as stated by many others. The overall result and consequence of this bill and amendment would cause more harm to homeownership than it would help the issue the proponents claim to help. Beyond that, I am a Me Too, along with the Nevada Bankers Association and the NLTA. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. McKee. BPS, next caller in opposition, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 216, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Yeager, and good morning, committee members. This is Brian Reeder, BRIANREEDER, speaking on behalf of the Nevada Credit Union League, representing credit unions throughout the state of Nevada. Credit unions are all member-owned, and we serve more than 370,000 Nevadans. First, we do want to acknowledge the county's effort to develop an amendment to relieve our concerns, and we would like to continue to work with them. That said, our key concern is that the bill enables these assessments to result in a super priority lien over existing and subsequent first mortgages. The behavior that causes these assessments is not something the credit union lender has any control over. We would like to help the county to address the challenges identified in their presentation and catch the bad guys, but at this time, this bill could be applied much more broadly and impact any mortgage holder, so we are opposed at this time. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Reeder. BPS, next caller in opposition, please.
Next caller with the last three digits of 056. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you very much, Chair Yeager and members of the committee. Thank you for your time today. My name is Jonathan Getty, Jonathan, GEDDE. I'm the chair of the Nevada Mortgage Lenders Association and chief executive of Simplify Mortgage. I'd like to start by saying that we sympathize with the county's position, specifically the short-term rentals. Having a few owners create serious problems for communities is a legitimate problem and absolutely needs a solution. However, we must strongly oppose this bill, certainly in its current form. In addition, we also believe that language that's supposedly has given cities similar authority needs to be looked at and likely removed from NRS. Placing punitive civil penalties in a priority lien position in front of a first mortgage is just not the right solution. There are lots of other ways that this could be addressed, and this not only causes a lot of problems, as you've heard, within the housing and housing finance industry. I don't actually believe that it would solve the problem. Federal law, my understanding, prohibits most anything from taking priority over federally related mortgage loans, and well over 80% of mortgage loans are federally insured or backed. And I believe that the county has estimated that 75% of the most problematic properties do have mortgage loans on them. My fear is these actions will almost certainly result in court actions that would pit communities and municipalities against the federal government, and winding up in a situation similar to what we had during the Homeowners Association super priority issue. The county stated that only 97 cases over a number of years. However, that's referencing only their interpretation of what the most serious cases are. The total number of cases cited by the county is 10,620. Assuming an average loan of $300,000, we're talking about $3.1 billion in mortgage loans. That's not an insignificant risk to the mortgage community, and steps will need to be taken to accommodate for that risk. And even if it is found that there isn't significant risk to federally related mortgages, there certainly would be to credit union loans and other non-federally related mortgages. While we understand it's not the county's intention to bring people into compliance, not to raise money and not to take properties, this bill is given the authority to do exactly that. And as the gentleman testified, the short-term rental fines can lead to devastating consequences. The mortgage industry is going to look at this as a potential risk posed by the language, and not what the county asserts as their intention to bring owners in compliance. Thank you for your time, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Getty. BPS, next caller in opposition, please.
Chair, there are no other callers in opposition on the line.
Thank you, BPS. I will close opposition testimony. I will now open it for neutral testimony. Anybody here in Carson City in neutral? I don't see anyone. Let's go to the Zoom. Is there anyone on the Zoom with us who would like to testify in the neutral position? I don't hear anybody or see anybody turning a camera on. Let's go to the phones, please, BPS, and see if there's anybody there in the neutral position.
Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in neutral of Senate Bill 57, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. We will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 693. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 693, please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Go ahead, caller.
Can you hear me? My name is Mary Beth Heichman. I had issues on the call in favor of, so I'm sorry, but I'm in favor of SB 57, so a yes. We've had a repeat offender and bad actor who makes 4-bedroom homes into 16-room party homes. One of his homes even advertises to cater to 500 guests for events. This bad actor has not paid a single dime, and we've been fighting for years. and not one citation has been paid. This is very disappointing that an out-of-state or out-of-country investor has no consequences. My neighbors, families, and myself are terrified that these mini hotels will be of great danger with a recent gang shooting and also constant speeding exotic cars over the weekend. If 97 cases are bad actors over the 3 years, I do not see this as a negative impact since rolled into taxes, but as an overall positive for our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. We're going to categorize your testimony as support. And at this time, BPS, I want to go back to supportive testimony. Hearing that there were a few people on the line who had some difficulty getting in the queue for support. So I'd like to go back and reopen support and give those folks an opportunity to provide supportive testimony. So BPS, if we could form a queue for supportive testimony and take the first caller, please.
My apologies. Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 57, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. We will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 963. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, my name is Linda Regal, R-I-E-G-L-E. I live in unincorporated Clark County in what's commonly known as Section 11, a rural preservation neighborhood. As you heard from the last speaker and many of my neighbors in letter forms, we have been subjected to the scourge of transient lodging in our neighborhood. Yes, Assemblyman Yeager, it is absolutely true about the monkeys and the clowns, and indeed that property is still operating. Perhaps not with the clowns every week, but the property is still operating with loud music and parties every weekend. Notwithstanding the fact that the rentals have turned largely single-family homes into concrete bunkhouses, they blatantly advertise they can sleep over 16 people and have parties up to 500. The counties advised us that they are virtually powerless to enforce the basic zoning law or code regulations. We have been boggled by the lack of enforcement, and that in turn engenders distrust in government, which none of us want. We all want us to be able to rely on our government to enforce the rules and regulations. Some of the testimonials, and this is online, for one property asserts that it was, quote, great for a big group, perfect for housing 150 people and sleeping 18. Indeed, those helping with the event. We must be frank here. While some people are truly here for a family reunion, there's no doubt that many wish to use a large party house to do so because they want to have a Vegas experience. They want loud music, to use drugs, illegal and illegal, and they have even seen what we call euphemistically used escort services. I'm no prude, and I don't care what one does, except these activities do not belong in a residential neighborhood. It's important that the county have the enforcement power to enforce these regulations. Please support Senate Bill 57. I'm sure that the mortgage issues can be resolved because indeed mortgages have clauses that indicate that they can be foreclosure for illegal activity. These activities are illegal and the mortgage companies have their own powers. Thank you again.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Regal. BPS, are there additional callers in support?
Yes, Chair. Next caller with the last 3 digits of 559. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yvette Williams, YVETTE, And because of my affiliation with several different organizations, I just want to say on the record that I'm calling as a private citizen and a resident of Section 11. I won't take the committee's time by repeating a lot of the things that you've heard in support, even some of our neighbors. But I would like to just reemphasize the conditions over here in Section 11 and just ask, if you have not had a chance to drive over into our neighborhood, please come. You all have my contact information. I did submit a letter on the record with more details and my contact information. I would be happy to personally escort you to our motel, hotel corridors in our neighborhood. We literally have, on one of our blocks alone, there are, because we are on large lots, half and acre lots, and by the way, we are protected in NRS as rural neighborhood preservations, and so we're being encroached on in violation of these of NRS. But I want to say that in just one block alone, there are probably, let's see, there's on one side of the street there are 5 homes, and on that one block there are 3 short-term rentals that are rented out as party houses. The facades on the front of the houses have been changed. They do not even look like residential homes. They put up these facade walls, which crazy decor on it, so that they can block the view so that law enforcement and code enforcement can't see in, and they can hide out behind these walls. They put illegal staircases in. They put illegal septic tanks that are now multiple septic tanks to try to serve the number of multiple bathrooms they've added. And these septic tanks are leaching into neighbors' yards. There's a health issue here as well. And we have not been able to get any resolve. We have been working with the county for approximately 5 years on this issue. We've worked with code. We've worked with law enforcement. I mean, it is just unbelievable what we lived through. And some of my neighbors, I feel so bad on that corridor street where there are 3 out of 5 homes. So the owner-occupied homes are right there between these homes. And we see an exit. People are selling their homes who have raised their families here, who want to, some are raising their grandkids. Some we have multiple family units living together, multi-generational. It's unbelievable what's going on over here. And so if you have not been over here, I just want to invite you to come. I would be happy to host you, take you, and drive you around our neighborhood so that you can see. I don't think there's one block in our neighborhood now, because we're so central to the Strip, that is not being impacted by these party houses. And so please, we ask you to please support the Senate Bill 57. Help us preserve our lifestyle. That's all we're asking for. We're property owners, taxpayers, voters, and we have rights too. So please, please pass Senate Bill 57. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Williams. And I'll note for committee members that there is a letter in support of the bill by Ms. Williams that can also be found on Nellis. BPS, are there additional callers in support?
For callers wishing to provide testimony in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 650, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for reopening the queue for support. Good morning to you and members of the committee. I'm Zach Bucher, Z-A-C-H-B-U-C-H-E-R, representing the city of Las Vegas. I wish I could be there in person, but for the sake of brevity, the city of Las Vegas is in support of SB 57 and the amendment offered by Clark County. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Bucher. BPS, are there additional callers in support, please?
Chair, there are no other callers in support at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I will then again close support, and just to make sure we're capturing everyone, BPS, I'm going to go back to opposition just for a moment to make sure that there's not anybody else on the phone line in opposition. So could you please confirm whether there's anyone else in opposition, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in opposition of Senate Bill 57, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. For callers wishing to provide testimony in opposition of Senate Bill 57, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers on the line in opposition at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I will close opposition, so then I will now go back to neutral. I think we opened neutral before, but I'm not sure if there were any callers who were actually in the neutral position. So BPS, could we please see if anyone would like to testify in the neutral position on Senate Bill 57?
Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in neutral of Senate Bill 57, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Callers wishing to provide testimony in neutral of Senate Bill 57, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers for neutral at this time.
Thank you, BPS. Thank you for helping us manage all the testimony this morning. I will close neutral testimony, and I would now invite Mr. Harrison back up to the table and invite him and his co-presenters on Zoom for any concluding remarks on Senate Bill 57.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Justin Harrison with Clark County. So just some brief concluding remarks, and happy to take any additional questions and clear up any misconceptions that may have been brought forward in testimony. Just want to reiterate the goal of this bill brought by Clark County's compliance. That is the whole impetus for putting in the provision to extinguish special assessments upon compliance. We don't want anything other than just that. I'm not familiar specific to Mr. Korndike's case, but would note that under the proposed bill, that as so long as he or any other property is in compliance, there should be no issue. I'm again unaware of the specifics of his case and whether or not there still are pending liens, but there would be no pending special assessments as the county does not have that authority. I also want to reiterate that, right, wrong, or indifferent, currently Clark County has the authority to legalize short-term rentals under the current statutory structure as they see fit. And currently there is specific zoning in place for those in the hotel corridor. So those short-term rentals operating outside of that area are doing so illegally. I can't speak to how property owners chose to either invest, market, or purchase those properties and what advice they may or may not have been given, but that is a current illegal activity. In addition, just want to address a quick point that was brought forward by Mr. Getty on the potentially affected mortgages reaching into the billions of dollars. According to the amendment that we have submitted and have worked on to narrow the categories, as well as to institute that $5,000 threshold, there are only 97 properties over the last 3 years. There are not thousands. There are 97 properties that would fall within the confines of those provisions. So I don't want to confuse anything. I don't want to mince words. That is what we have seen as we have gone through our data. In addition, have worked at length with the mortgage and banking and real estate industry to try to come to a solution, and really think this is a great compromise. The idea again is compliance, and by coming into compliance, any special assessment would be extinguished. We've asked for opponents to bring forward any idea that that they may be using as incorporated cities are currently using this power, and it seems to not have an effect on their industries. In fact, there wasn't any knowledge that it was happening prior to bringing this bill forward. So there really doesn't seem to be an effect on the industry. We've also asked, as opponents have told us that they proactively have reached out to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to receive a legal opinion and have not received that, to see how those institutions would see this language moving forward. And again, it's been brought up, but would like to see how the mortgage industry would have the ability to take any kind of action, as many of these mortgages may be written as a primary residence or as a residential dwelling, and they're currently being operated as a commercial enterprise. So we think there is tools that they have. We are asking for tools that the county may have or would like to have in order to really bring properties into compliance. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you again for the time and the opportunity. Apologize for the lengthy hearing, but would be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I appreciate that. Mr. Anderson, I wanted to give you a chance to make any concluding remarks as well, since you were a key part of the presentation.
Jim Anderson with the record. I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything to add to Mr. Harrison's testimony.
Great. Thank you so much for being here this morning. And I don't think we have additional questions, but I would ask committee members, if you do have questions after this morning's hearing, to please follow up offline. Again, we appreciate the three of you being here, spending some time with us this morning in Assembly Judiciary, and we hope you have a great rest of the day. I will now close the hearing on Senate Bill 57. That takes us to our final item on this morning's agenda, and that is public comment. By way of reminder, we reserve up to 30 minutes at the end of each meeting for public comment. Public commenters will have 2 minutes to provide public comment. Public comment is a time to raise matters of a general nature within the jurisdiction of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. It is not a time to provide additional testimony on bills that we have already heard and closed. So with that being said, we'll start here in Carson City. Would anyone like to give public comment this morning in Carson City? I don't see anyone running up to the table. No elbows, no jockeying for position. So thank you all audience members for being well behaved this morning. BPS, could we go to the phone lines to see if there's public comment there, please?
Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. We will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 556. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Anne Marie Grant, ANNEMARIEGRANT, sister of Thomas Purdy, who was hogtied by Reno police for over 40 minutes and then asphyxiated to death by Washoe County Sheriff's Office. Today, I would like to talk about Raphael Olimus, affectionately known as Ralphie to those who love him. Ralphie was 23 years old when he was shot and killed July 14th, 2011 by LVMPD officers Christopher Grievous, David Hagar, and Joseph Huchin, who was CIT trained and who fired a low-lethal shotgun at Ralphie on 7/14/11 at 6:46 a.m. Alma Chavez called 911 requesting the police respond to her house because her son Ralphie was out of control. Alma said that Ralphie had anger problems and was not in his right mind and asked dispatch if they would send someone specialized in mental illness. She specifically told police during the call, "Please don't shoot my son." At 6:58 a.m., the officers arrived in the neighborhood and saw Ralphie walking towards them with a knife in his hand. The officers stopped in front approximately 90 yards from where they first saw Ralphie. Ralphie came approximately within 40 feet of the officers, and Huchin fired his low-lethal shotgun 4 times. That hit his throat, stomach, lower abdomen, and right hip. Officer Grievous and Hagar fired at Ralphie, and he collapsed to the ground. He was then handcuffed and would succumb to his injuries, which consisted of 1 perforating gunshot wound to the arm, penetrating gunshot wound to the left arm, penetrating gunshot wound to the right shoulder. A bullet was recovered from his spine. A perforating gunshot wound to the front of the neck, which entered and exited in the front of the neck. It always troubles me in the reports when they claim they provided medical attention right away. They claim that about my brother, yet CPR was never started by deputies at all. The practice of handcuffing human beings after being mortally wounded by police has got to end. Another mother left to live with regret that she called the police to help her suicidal son, only for LVMPD to kill Raffy. Another family living the never-ending nightmare that is when your loved one is killed by police. In the words of Ralphie's sister, "I miss you being around, Ralphie. I forget you aren't coming back, and sometimes it hits me really hard. I just listened to your song, and it feels like you're still there. Mama and us, we will never be the same without you. I know I didn't say it often, but I love you." His mother, Alma Chavez, has testified this legislative session, as I have, in hopes that no more families have to endure this heartache when law enforcement kill our loved ones without consequence. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, Ms. Grant. BPS, are there additional callers for public comment?
Caller with the last three digits of 643, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. Wiz Rizard, Wizrouzard with Americans for Prosperity. Just want to say thank you to the committee. This was well ran. I greatly appreciate you all giving each side adequate time to express themselves. I've been in other committees where this was not adhered to. So I just want to say thank you all. You've been great, and appreciate you, Chair, for running this committee graciously.
Thank you for your public comment, Mr. Rizard. BPS, are there additional callers for public comment this morning?
Caller with the last three digits of 559, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yvette Williams, YVETTE, WILLIAMS. I'm calling right now for public comment as chair of the Clark County Black Caucus. I just wanted to take a moment to just acknowledge you, Chairman Yeager, and your committee. We've been watching diligently this legislative session. It's fast-paced. It's very hard to really be able to navigate and be able to participate in a normal session. With this being a virtual session, it's even more difficult for community to really engage and participate. And so I can only imagine how difficult it is for all of you. But I thought it was important to take a moment to just recognize your committee today. We see the work that you're doing, and I just want you to know that we truly appreciate the legislation that's coming before you. There were a lot of issues this past summer around racial justice, and there were promises made by members of the legislature as well as our governor that issues around racial justice was going to be centered in this legislative session, and I see that clearly in your committee work. And so thank you all, each of you, for your diligence and for the time that you're spending, your careful thought that you're taking, and especially for your compassion and empathy when you hear our stories. So thank you very much for all that you're doing and for your public service to Nevada. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your public comment, Ms. Williams. BPS, are there additional callers with public comment this morning?
If you have recently joined the call and would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. For callers wishing to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no further callers for public comment at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I will close public comment. Anything else from committee members this morning? I don't see anything else. I did just want to thank our public commenters for acknowledging the work of the committee, and I wanted to say that, you know, if you like the way that Assembly Judiciary Committee runs, I think that's a testament to the hard work that members put in preparing for these meetings, and more importantly, the hard work behind the scenes that our staff does day in and day out. This simply would not work the way it works without a lot of people in the background doing things that are not often acknowledged. So let me just publicly say thank you to everyone who's made these meetings happen over the past few months and will continue to do so in the next 3 weeks. We do appreciate you. In terms of where we go from here, tomorrow we have a meeting. It's at 9 o'clock. We have 3 bills on the agenda. We'll be talking about no-knock warrants, solicitation of charitable contributions, and everyone's favorite topic, another bill on cannabis. And with that committee, we will have heard all the Senate Judiciary, all the bills we received from the Senate in this committee. We will have heard them all by the end of tomorrow's meeting. Now, I do anticipate we're going to get more bills, either bills being drafted or some coming out of Senate Finance, so our work is not yet done, but in terms of next week's Friday committee passage deadline, we are looking on track for that. While we were here in the meeting today, we put an agenda out for Friday. Friday is going to be a 9 o'clock start. We have a work session agendized, and we have 10 bills that are on the work session. So committee members, if you could begin to look at that work session, at least the agenda, to see which bills are on there. We're still getting the work session document together, But please do let me know if you have any concerns with any of the bills that are listed on the work session document for Friday. And then next week, we'll just sort of see how things go at the end of this week, and we'll certainly have at least 1 or 2 work sessions next week, and we'll see if we have any bills to hear as well. So again, members, thank you for your patience this morning, and it was a longer meeting than we've been having more recently, but I appreciate your time and attention. I hope you all have a great rest of the day. We'll see you back here in this committee meeting, this committee room at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. This meeting is adjourned.